last weekend, I was in the local department store getting a few bits and bobs to finish off the outfit for tonight. And waiting in the queue, quite a few people in front of me. And the next thing, somewhere behind me, oh, there is this scream and another scream. And I look back, no one was being murdered. It was a child having a meltdown. Well, as I turned back forward, the lady behind me caught my eye. And as she caught my eye, she did the... And it just made me stop and think how easily we get frustrated and annoyed with these children's behavior and think, naughty child. This evening, I would like to share with you in defense of a naughty child, seeing it from a different perspective. So imagine you're that parent, you're that teacher, you're seeing this child and thinking, why are they behaving like this? Why are they so defiant? Why are they testing the boundaries all the time? Often you hear parents say, the rest of the kids, they just go with the flow. But this one child is just always, just won't cooperate. We just don't know what to do with this child. And it makes you stop and think, well, what might be going on? I'd like to share with you a few images, share a little bit around thinking about these children. You know your child needs a balanced diet, yet this child won't actually eat anything other than pasta, soft pasta. Nana has put tomato ketchup on it. Oh, you'll love it, she says. This couple of siblings are forever fighting. She teases him. He gives her a shove. She yells. The next thing, they're rolling on the floor fighting. You would think at his age he knew better. In this house, hairbrushing is a drama of epic proportions. The first tug of the hairbrush and she's having a meltdown. What do we do? How do we make sense of these children's behavior, like the one in the department store? When we stop and think about it, there maybe is something going on. But what is it? How do we understand what might be going on? Because we see these children feeling frustrated, and parents, teachers also feel that frustration, that concern, anxiety, overwhelm. What is going on here? And it's as though that child isn't comfortable in their own skin. You notice their self-confidence is eroding. And if they've started school, there's a whole avalanche of issues. And if you're the parent, you probably have noticed that raised eyebrow, that sense of badly behaved child, bad parenting. And sometimes perhaps when you're having one of those dips, that low moment in your parenting, maybe you think, is it my parenting? What if there is a missing piece of the jigsaw? What if this isn't misbehavior, but there's something else going on? How would we understand what's needed and what is going on? What scientists now know is something that many parents and even people in professions like health and education don't yet fully understand or take awareness of. And that is, there are a number of people in the world, and children too, obviously, who have a heightened level of sensory sensitivity. So if you think back to when you were children, which many of us as adults, we've sort of forgotten a lot of that vibrancy and intensity. But just think back, and perhaps you remember a little bit about the Rice Krispies, the pop and the crackle, oozy mud between your toes, the soft, silky puppy, the smell of the rain coming, and the caress of the soft breeze on your skin and tussling your hair. All of these things the young child and the sensitive child are so aware of. And yet we as adults have often lost the sense of the rich, vibrant intensity of life. We have developed sensory filters because we'd be overwhelmed if we had all of this coming in all the time. So we've developed sensory filters as we mature, and yet somehow we've lost often that vibrancy. We've forgotten what it was like as young children. We probably remember learning at school about the 5 senses and knowing those 5 senses. And it's really important to have an awareness that each person's sensory sensitivity is different. Each child, each person sees, hears, tastes, smells, feels differently to anybody else. Each one's sensory reality is different and unique. And particularly with children, this, before they've developed their sensory filters, this is even more pronounced. So, I'm going to invite you that we take a moment to try and imagine what it is like for children, part that we've so much forgotten. So I'm going to invite you to join me in a visualization, because this could help us just to think how it is for these children. So let's take a sensational trip to New York. I invite you to get yourselves comfortable in your chair, to close your eyes, to take a few deep breaths. And you are now in the middle of the intersection of 42nd Street and 5th Avenue. The noise is deafening, engines roaring, brakes squealing, hooters blasting, such a cacophony of noise. Oh, and the bright billboards flashing, the yellow taxis zooming, and the sun streaming right in your eyes. And if that isn't enough, the stench of engine fumes and of garbage. And you aren't actually wearing the comfortable clothes you put on today when you came out. You actually realize you're wearing a new, crisply starched Manhattan suit that itches and scratches, that you feel so uncomfortable in. And you notice you have a hamburger and think, perhaps something to eat will help calm my stomach. You take a bite of the hamburger. Ooh, it's cold, it's greasy, and it's smothered in Roquefort cheese and Dijon mustard. Oh. So I invite you to open your eyes and just notice, as you open your eyes and come back into the room, just notice how that experience was for you. And now imagine that somebody walks up to you whilst you're there in the middle of all that overwhelm and ask you a very reasonable question. You know, something like, how do I get to the subway? I wonder how you might have responded. Do you think that you would have responded rationally? Or do you think maybe you might have been rather frustrated and irritated, perhaps said something a little bit antisocial or made a gesture? Or maybe you felt so overwhelmed that you couldn't actually even hear what was being said, you couldn't register what was being said, or if you could, you just couldn't answer. When we hold that in mind, it starts to give us an idea of how it might be for some of these children. So let us look again at those children. Perhaps this child's taste buds are so sensitive that the tastes of food really are a challenge for her. Perhaps some textures really are a trouble for her as well. Just notice her eyes. Notice her mouth. Notice her hand. What is she experiencing? This boy perhaps has auditory sensitivity, and the screams of his sister trigger his reaction of fight or flight. He's not behaving badly on purpose. It's all he can manage right now. And what about our little girl? It's possible her scalp is so sensitive that when her hair is brushed, it literally feels a pain. And our little lad in the supermarket, for him, it's possible that he is experiencing an auditory and a visual overload. If he's sensitive in that way, can you imagine how challenging all the noise, all the movement, everything that's going on in a supermarket? No wonder he ends up acting out. This little girl has a sensitive olfactory system, and very likely, if she needs to go to the toilet, public toilets are an absolute no-no to her. She cannot stand the smell. We also now know that there are 3 other senses. These are 3 that most people don't know. The vestibular. If your child is like this, they can't sit still. They're on the move, all the go. All the time they're on the go. And this child's vestibular sense is perhaps underdeveloped. They need to keep moving to keep their bodies alert. Or perhaps this is your household and spilt milk and other things happen pretty frequently. If your child's proprioceptive system is underdeveloped, then your child is not well able to control their body movements. And the other one is the interoceptive. Perhaps you find yourself having to keep a spare pair of pants in the bag. This child is unlikely to be able to sense her inner body signals. So as we hold all that in mind, we can realize that for these children, it is easy for them to get overstressed. If you are thinking of the situation, there are some people, adults as well, who just can easily feel overwhelmed. But before we go into that, let me ask you, how many people in the world do you imagine experience this? 1 in 1,000? Maybe give hands if you think it might be 1 in 1,000. 1 in 100? Some saying 1 in 100. 1 in 50? 1 in 20? Actually, 1 in 6. It is that many who experience sensory sensitivity. 1 in 6, which is 15%. And that 15% means that in each classroom there is likely to be 3 or 4 children who experience sensory sensitivity. And that is going to impact how they are in the classroom. Can you imagine what it is like trying to listen to the teacher when there's just so much going on that is overwhelming you? Can you imagine if the teacher's voice and all the other sounds are equally competing? The pencil scratching on the paper, somebody's feet shuffling on the floor, the click of the door, all these sounds, all the visual things. And what about the thing of the tactile? Because school uniforms are often made of synthetic materials that are really uncomfortable for children. And their feet squashed into socks, cramped into shoes that make them so uncomfortable, and then a hard desk as well. Doesn't it make sense these children will find it hard to listen, that they'll find it hard to focus, that it'll be difficult for them to learn? Because if we don't understand this type of behavior, we will think of it as being naughty behavior. Yet what if we see this as stressed behavior? It throws a different perspective on it. So you're thinking, well, is it like this forever? Some people do grow out of their sensory sensitivity. They develop sensory filters as they mature. But for some people, sensory sensitivity remains lifelong with them. And these people have a very tuned in sense to the nuances of life. They are so aware of change, of beauty. They are aware of the inner experience. They are aware of the interactions between others. These people in life are the ones who are so tuned in. And the interesting thing is that figure of 15% is also relevant because what we now know is that in animals that are in herds or in packs, they also have a number in their community that are hypersensitive. And they are the ones that are the leaders in that pack, in that herd. They are the ones the other animals look to. And so what is this saying to us? It's saying these children who are so aware, these children are the ones who see life. And yes, they may, through their language, give us a message through their behavior. And what is that message? It's saying, no, no more, that's enough. Well, if you think about it in relation to giving an alert signal that something's wrong, what might these children be telling us in life? That maybe our whole environment has got so overstimulated that it's as though they're the canary in the coal mine, telling us this is not okay, too much stimulation, too much going on. What do we need to do to reclaim the well-being of the child, of ourselves, of our community, of our planet? These children who are so tuned into life, they are the ones who actually, when they experience it, will have a sense often of devastation, of distress, and yet also of exuberance and elation and wonder. What can we learn from them? As we consider this, I invite you, the next time you see a child perhaps having a meltdown in the supermarket, I invite you, when your mind wants to jump to naughty child, to bold child, as we say in Ireland, to stop and think, what else might be going on? What might this child's body language, experience, behavior be telling us? And what difference will it make if we listen? Because these children are our artists, our entrepreneurs, our activists, our innovators. They are our intuitive change makers when we reframe how we see them. When we recognize we have the power and the science to give these children what they need to truly thrive. So what do they need? They need us to see each one for who they truly are. They need us to look beneath the behavior and seek to understand. They need us not to criticize, but to empathize. They need us not to be furious, but curious. They need us to see them for who they truly are.